I am going to be, yes, at the first segment. So I would first like to address the first affirmative's case structure, which is their significance claim was that the exclusionary rule protects the guilty. Their inherency claim was that the exclusionary rule is harmful to our justice system, and their solvency claim was that holding police misconduct accountable rather than excluding evidence will improve our justice system. So first I'm going to address their significance claim, which is that the exclusionary rule protects the guilty. To back that up, they first said that the exclusionary rule allows criminals to get away, which actually the exclusionary rule is more, the purpose of the exclusionary rule as defined by David Carlson from Cornell University is that it is meant to deter law enforcement officers from conducting searches or seizures in violation of the Fourth Amendment and to provide remedies to defendants whose rights have been infringed. So the exclusionary rule is more to prevent, is more for preventing than for letting criminals get away. Their next supportive claim was that there's no alternative methods for convicting the guilty, which is actually false because there are a few other ways that you can convict the guilty, one of which is actually a plea of guilt, which is a guilty or no contest plea entered as a judge-approved plea bargain, results in a criminal conviction. The defendant's guilt is established just as it would be after trial. The conviction will show up on the defendant's criminal record. So even with there's ways of convicting the guilty that don't even need evidence. They can be admitting their guilt just and being convicted. And another method of convicting the guilty would be through witness testimony, which also counts as reliable evidence. And the testimony of a witness that, an excerpt that I took from the U.S. Title III code is that the testimony of a witness that he saw the accused commit or participate in the commission of the crime for which the accused is being tried shall be admissible in evidence in a criminal prosecution in any trial court ordained and established under the Article 3 of the Constitution of the United States. The affirmative's next claim is the inherency claim, which was that the exclusionary rule is harmful to our justice system. Their first supportive topic was that the justice is only served once the truth is revealed. The purpose of justice is in fact to find the truth, and the exclusionary rule helps strengthen an individual's innocence. This can be supported with the presumption of innocence, which is one of the most sacred principles in the American criminal justice system, holding that a defendant is innocent until proven guilty. In other words, the prosecution must prove beyond a reasonable doubt each essential element of the crime charged. So everyone's heard of you're innocent until proven guilty, and that's the purpose of a trial, to find justice and to find truth. Their next supportive claim was that the exclusionary rule excludes reliable sources and evidence. They use the fruit of poisonous tree doctrine, which, as they said, is any evidence that was gained, that is gained afterwards from an illegal, from gaining evidence illegally cannot be used in a court of law, but actually there's exceptions to that doctrine, and some of the exceptions are there's the presumption of innocence doctrine, which is one of the most sacred principles in American. The good faith exception is one of the exceptions, and that's under the good faith exception, evidence is not excluded if it is obtained by officers who reasonably rely on a search warrant that turned out to be invalid. So an example would be if a officer got a search warrant and then they conducted a search and seizure of evidence, and they later learned that the search warrant was invalid because the officer was under the impression that the search warrant is valid, that evidence is therefore still admissible in court. Another exception to the fruit of poisonous tree doctrine is the independent source doctrine, and that is that evidence initially obtained during an unlawful search or seizure may later be admissible if the evidence is later obtained through a constitutionally valid search or seizure. So any evidence, even though it was obtained legally through one instance, if it was found through another way, it can still be admissible in court. And then Another doctrine was the attenuation doctrine, which is in cases where the relationship between the evidence challenged and the unconstitutional conduct is too remote and attenuated, the evidence may be admissible. So that means that if there's a small, if the infraction of gaining the evidence was minimal, then it can still be admissible in court. And the final exclusion exemption for the fruit of poisonous tree doctrine is the inevitable discovery doctrine, and that is that I took this from also David Carlson from Cornell University, related to independent source doctrine above, and also adopted in Nix v. Williams. The inevitable discovery doctrine allows admission of evidence that was discovered in an unlawful search or seizure if it would have been discovered in the same condition anyways by an independent line of investigation that was already being pursued. So an example of this would be if a law enforcement officer broke into a house unlawfully and carrying evidence, and they saw a note, an example, or an address for a weed field. That evidence would be inadmissible. However, because that weed field would eventually be discovered if it was near a public place, that evidence would be admissible. And the affirmative's last solvency claim was that holding police misconduct accountable rather than excluding evidence will improve our justice system. The purpose of the exclusionary rule is to hold the police accountable, as I previously stated, and to prevent them from committing unlawful acts. And whenever a police officer begins their training to become a police officer, they have to go through training to know how to conduct evidence rightfully. So they did mention that by removing abolishing the exclusionary rule, police would be gaining more training, but they already get training or else they wouldn't be able to become police officers. And then they also said that it allows, and I'm done.